Hello. I'm sorry, I'm the one with the big boomy voice. I'm really sorry. My name is Freckleton, and I want to talk to you today about the power of one. Okay? And so I want you to shout the power of one. After three. 1, 2, 3.
The power of one!
That was kind of okay-ish. That's kind of like almost power. Yeah? Try it one more time. 1, 2, 3.
The power of one!
Okay. And the reason I want you to do that is because I am the power of one. As I said earlier on, my name is Freckleton. I'm a pastor of Vine Community Church. We're in Butetown, Cardiff. But I'm also the director of 2 organizations that have at their heart the reduction of the impact of homelessness. Because that's all around us today. And it's really fitting with the first speaker that, we could talk about this. And to link that up, really, it's about identifying what that really means. So here we go. There's a story of a man walking along a beach. And as he walks along the beach, he sees this lad, this young boy, throwing something into the water. And he sees this boy throwing stuff. So he's walking over to him to find out what's going on. And you can just see this lad stooping down, throwing stuff into the water. As he gets closer to the boy, he says, "What are you doing?" He said, "I'm saving starfish." Saving starfish. He said, "Look, all these starfish, the tide's gone out, the starfish is stuck on the beach, and they're going to die." The man looked at the boy and said, "Look, there are miles and miles of beach. There are hundreds of starfish. You are making no difference. Don't waste your time." The lad looks at him and says, "You might be right." But bending down, he picked up a starfish and threw it back into the water and said, "I made a difference to that one." And then he reached down again and he picked up another one. He said, "I've made a difference to that one. And I've made a difference to that one." By this time, the man starts walking off. And so the boy is shouting, "I've made a difference to that one." Yeah, there are still hundreds of starfish on the beach, but he'd made a difference to some of the starfish. That's a good story, isn't it? But you see, it could have been a great story. Can you imagine what would have happened if the man had said, "I will give you my power of one. I will help you to save some starfish"? What a difference that would make. So what's my background? Well, in 1986, I was invited with a group of other people to go into a prison and to do a presentation. Not by Her Majesty, by the way. But I was invited to go in and do a presentation. And that really impacted my life right up until today. So 33 years later, I'm still going into prisons. And it's funny because when I talk to inmates, they're like, "Wow, that's a sentence." But 33 years of going into prisons, doing presentations and talking to inmates. And in that time, I've seen some people who are in despair and totally lost. I've seen some people who are trying to figure out their next game plan, because prison is a great place to learn how to do crime. But I've also seen people who have hope. And so especially when they're given their release date, they're like, "I've got 3 months. I'm out in 3 months." I remember one particular case, this guy said, "Boss, I'm out in 3 months." And you could see the hope in his face. He really was counting the days till his release. The next time I saw him, he's like, "I've got 2 months. I've got 2 months and I'm out of here." The next time I saw him, he said, "I will not be here when you come back on your next visit." And he was right. I got there and the lads were celebrating and they're like, "He's on the out." Now, I happen to be working in the same city into which he was released. And one day I'm driving down the road and I see him. I'm like, brilliant, he's free, he's at liberty, he's got his hope. Guess what happened 2 months later? He was back in prison. It's what we call the rotating door. You see, if you do prison for 3-4 years plus, think how much society has changed in that time. And you come out, very often you are homeless. So when I saw him, I could see that he was broken, demoralized. He really looked sad. And I went to speak to him and he said, "I tried, but when I got out there, I had nowhere to go. So I went back to the people that I was with before I came in." That's a story that's very common in prison. And so that got me thinking about how we might make a difference. Do you know that between January and March this year, 15,000 prisoners have been released? I know it's crazy. there were 82,000 people in prison, and in the last quarter, or in that quarter, 15,000 people were released. A report said only two-thirds of them knew where they were going when they were released. That means there's 5,000 people that's been released, having no home, no address to go to, but being put out on the streets. That's why, when we see homeless people, you speak to them very often, they've had a prison experience. What can we do about that? What can we do about that? Well, in 2016, a friend of mine, Dave Hale, and myself, we sat down, we thought, can we make a difference? So we opened a supported accommodation. We opened a house to support prison leavers. And you think that was great. I phoned the council. They said, sorry, we don't need your service. Can you believe that? I phoned another council, and they said to me, we don't need your service. They actually said to me, who's commissioned your service? Who's paying for you to do this? And we're like, no, people are coming out of prison, and they've got nowhere to go, and we're just trying to provide a house for them. They weren't interested. We pushed and persevered, and we did it. We opened this house, and I can remember it today. The first resident, I met him in prison. I did some work with him prior, and then on his release date, I met him at the gate, put him in my car, drove him to the house, and he walked in, and it was like, wow, from a cell to a home. In the 3 years that we've been running, we've worked with 10 men, and 7 of those 10 men have gone on to have a more secure life. Yeah, 3 of them. Yeah, that means that 3 of them have reoffended and have gone back into prison. But if you know anything about reoffending rates, 30% is not bad. Can you see what I'm trying to say? It was during this time that I met Stuart and Caroline Johnson. It was a bit of a weird meeting. Somebody mentioned their names and it didn't click. Then I went up to their home, rang the doorbell. Caroline opens the door and she says, Lester. And I'm like, Caroline. I used to sit next to her when I was 10. It was like, what? And that was the last time I saw her, you know. And so we had this conversation. And they were in the throes of setting up Amazing Grace Spaces. See, I've got so busy chatting to you that I haven't done my slides, but let's just see if we can do the slides. Okay. So Beth Sharon is the house that we set up. And then Amazing Grace Spaces. Am I going the right way? Let's just do that. I've lost it. Okay, there we go. Okay, Amazing Grace Spaces, they were just setting that up. And so Amazing Grace Spaces is really about working with the those who are vulnerable, those who are homeless, those who are prison leavers. And so we got talking, and at the time, they were on a project converting 40-foot shipping containers into one-bedroom homes. It's like, what a great idea. This is what it looks like, if I can go the right way. Oh, there it is. It's a bit of a delay. This is what it looks like. Absolutely amazing. We had people come up and look at it, counselors, people get excited about it. It was, really good. Yeah. I think the delay is getting about, there you go. That's what it looks like inside. Let's try that again. There you go. It's working. So we then provided and were producing these for Myrtle Valley Homes as affordable accommodation, and also for Wrexham for a move on for their night shelter. So people would move from the night shelter into supported accommodation and from there into flats. That's what we were doing. But while we were doing that, we recognized that things were changing on the streets because we started to see the rough sleepers in the tents. And that, is a major problem. And so I started talking to Stuart and he said, oh, do you know what? There was a project that I started a while ago, because Stuart is that kind of guy. And he said, it's called The Pod, but I've shelved it. And so we started talking about The Pod. And before we knew it, we made a prototype of The Pod. And we had councillors come down. We had MPs, the police, everybody's like, this is a great idea. Because we will be able to get people from the streets, from here to there. Wow, what a difference. And during February of this year, we put 2 pods on the streets of Newport. Well, not quite on the streets, but on the streets of Newport. And in 6 months, 2 pods removed 7 tents. I'm going to say that again. 2 pods, 6 months, 7 tents off the streets. Can you imagine what would happen if we had 6 pods and 18 months? The problem is, this is a unique innovation. We've had people from all over the world, Australia, America, California, contact us saying, how can we get hold of your pods? How can we use this to reduce homelessness? Unfortunately, it's not working in Newport right now. That's what it looks like inside. So inside, we've got a bunk, a chemical toilet, and the obligatory, just in the top left-hand corner, phone charger. Because everybody has a phone. So what's all that about? You see, with AGS and with West Sharon, we're not just about finding a place, a safe place. We are about development. We're about support. Because when people are out on the streets, they just don't need shelter. They need support. I remember asking a beggar, so one of the things I do is I'm an executive coach. And I saw this guy and I thought, let me just see what's going on. And I started having the conversation. So I started having a coaching conversation with him. And I said, tell me a story. He told me a story. I said, so what would you like to do next? What is the next step in your life? And he said, I would like to get from here to over there. It was another begging spot. I said, what? He said, yeah. He said, where I am here, I'm very vulnerable. I can't see the police when they're coming. And it's not a great spot to beg. But you see where that guy is there? He's got the best spot. He can see the police, and he gets so much footfall, he's making a lot of money. The beggar had an aspiration. Every single one of us have an aspiration. And it's about how we use that. And so that's what our organizations are about. It's about bringing change. So how do we bring change? Alan Duchman, in his book, Change or Die, great book, if you've not read it, read it. He says there are the traditional ways of bringing change: fact, fear, and force. Yes, you think about it, if you went through school, the fact is you do this, you will be punished, and this will impact your education, and we will do it to the force, all our power. And he turns that around and he says, in order to get long-lasting change, what you need are 3 R's. Relationship. You need a positive relationship based on trust. And that's what happens when people come into the pod. We develop a positive relationship based on trust. Then you need to repeat that relationship. For me, that's about making that relationship deeper, causing it to grow. And then you need to reframe the relationship. Because initially, when people come in, we have the power, they don't. But actually, within time, they have power. Their stories are power. They also can contribute. When we were making the containers, we had people who had experienced homelessness making the containers for people who were homeless. Wow, the power of one. So let me just bring this down, because it brings me to another story. And it's about another boy on the beach. And there's this boy on the beach watching the men of his village trying to put a large shipping boat back into the water. You see, a freak wave had washed it up and damaged it, and they'd repaired it, but they knew that the time was running out to get it back into the water. So they all had poles, and they're pushing, and he goes along and tries to help, but one of the men said, what are you doing? This is man's work, get out of the way. And they're pushing, but the boat is not moving, it's not getting into the water. They pushed for most of the day. Then they had a break. And the leader said, we've got to get this into the water now, or we're going to miss the opportunity. So they G'd themselves up, and they shouted, and they did all that macho stuff, and got their poles, and once again, started pushing at the boat. And they're pushing away. And at that point, the lad sees that there's a gap. And he sees a discarded pole that was broken. And he grabs it. And he sticks it in. And he starts to push. And he starts to behave like the men. All their heads are shaking because they're exhausted. Their legs are shaking. And he's shaking. And he's just about to give up when the boat moves. And it moves an inch. And they all realize that it's moved, and they gather strength, and they push again, and it moves, and they push again, and it moves, and eventually it's in the water. And then all the men are like, yeah, high-fiving and doing all the stuff that they do. Nobody recognized the boy. But the boy was the power of one. And what I'm trying to say to you is no matter what you've got, you have and you are the power of one. And you could use your power to make a difference. You see, time has become our greatest commodity. We say money makes the world go round, but I say people make the difference. And if you would give some of your power to a small organization, to somebody in your community, you will make the difference. My name is Lester Freckleton. Thank you very much.